Welcome to a very special episode of Blossom. No, sorry. It's a very special episode of Canucks This Week.
Paul, we're here in person.
Oh, yeah, we are. It's
good.
How are you? You do come in the office occasionally, but this is the first video we've done
3 years.
face-to-face in probably close to 3 years, yeah. So we're missing Ed Willis. Jesus Christ, how much are we going to have to listen to? No, that was my good Ed impression. But here we are.
Is that Tony? No.
Yeah, no, Woody's RV, woodysrv.com, Western Canada's largest selection of RVs. I don't have the deal of the week in front of me that I always look up and fantasize about being able to travel and get out of this cold weather. But yes. Here we are, Patrick. Nice to see you.
Hi. Yes.
Nice to see
Trekked
you.
in from UBC today.
Yeah, and our lovely videographer, Mike Bell, making this possible. So hopefully it's a little higher quality than you're used to, that high quality. We broke out
Paul's
the budget. We broke out the prop budget with my old programs. Before we get into the state of the team today, because it's like in worse shape than this crumbling program, I did want to touch on this just because we were talking about it a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember, when I started doing hits with Team 1040, there was a big piece there with Don Taylor where we started telling these stories about when we were kids, and you'd go to a game and you'd run around after the game looking for spare programs and ticket stubs and everything else. Wow, yeah, that was after the fact, but I'm just saying like memorabilia, right? Like I found these at my dad's house, from the 70s and 80s. Obviously the Flying V that people love. But this doesn't exist anymore.
No.
And I know you were recently on the road.
You don't see them anywhere, really.
Yeah, we're a little challenged.
Washington. I picked one up in Washington.
Yeah, but mementos, souvenirs?
No, and then digital tickets. I mean, they occasionally, I guess they print them occasionally for things like that. But yeah, no, it's something different. I mean, it's part of what we do too, right? It's trying to, we engage. You have to engage with people in different ways and find different ways to interact. And here we are doing a video.
Well, let me say this: I'm not sure that you actually would want anything these days to prove that you were at a Canucks game. It segues nicely into something I wanted to ask you about because it was pondering. Our good friend Jonathan McDonald trademarked that word. We're pondering what was happening with the Canucks. Second worst home record in the league.
Yes.
Second worst home goals against in the league. The only team that's worse is the Anaheim Ducks.
Yes.
Not very mighty these days. What's going on with this team? Like, honestly, joking around about this stuff, I get that people want to tank, but you're spending a lot of money to go to these games. Don't you want to be entertained?
Unless you're getting student rush tickets. It's a good question. The sort of, I mean, first of all, it is the context of the league. Obviously, goals are up. Everyone's scoring more. It's just that's a thing that's happening.
But everyone's scoring more. They're the worst.
On top of that,
second worst.
On top of that, it's just the defensive breakdowns are really stunning. Like it's kind of hard to watch. And obviously we have to sit back and try to explain what happened or understand what happened. Some of it is okay. They're trying to change whatever system it is they have. They're trying to do things, so things are different. But some of it's just, it is a remarkable collection of guys that just aren't very good on defense, and I think that's a large part of it. And they haven't had very good goaltending. I mean, the better goaltending doesn't get them a whole much further ahead than where they are. But, I think the fact that they've had such bad goaltending has really exposed the challenges that were always there. We saw how good Thatcher Demko was last year. We saw, you throw the COVID season out the window. You go back to 2019-20 when Jacob Markstrom was here, the way he papered. We knew that they were not very good defensively, that he was papering over problems. A guy that was, a guy that was a Vezina candidate, so two out of the previous 3 seasons essentially have had a Vezina candidate in net, papering over their problems, and then you come to this year and they haven't had anything close to that. So it's everything. It really is everything. It's in the end what we knew. Poor collection of defensemen who've gotten older way quicker than I think anybody went to. Obviously, Oliver Ekman-Larsson is the person that everybody talks about, but you look to what they were. Whether you like the trade or not, when they picked the player up 2 years ago, they thought this is a guy who's still got a lot in him. He's maybe not going to be the Norris Trophy candidate he once was. That's reality. But I don't think they thought the fall off would be this fast, this soon. and it's been drastic. Like, you can just tell he's a guy that, he puts on a brave face. He's always happy to face the media, talk to us, whatever. And he says he feels good and he feels well, but you'll watch him play and you just can't help but feel that knee is bugging him. That knee is keeping him from moving. He gets blown past all the time on rushes, and he's just, in many ways, he is just such a sort of summation right there of all the problems that have set in for the Canucks defensively.
If I would challenge. Well, I think this is a fun debate, probably for another time. The challenge about papering over the cracks, because the goalie's part of the team. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to say, "Hey, we're the '85 Oilers. This team clearly isn't, and we're going to let
'85 Canucks maybe."
Yeah, exactly. Where's Petr Skriko when you need him?
Yeah.
Or Jim Benning on defense in '85. But the Oilers would say Grant Fuhr will save us, and we're just going to we're going to be defensively irresponsible, and we're going to outscore you.
Sure.
But when that goaltending isn't there, obviously it all collapses. But to go to your point, there can be a lot of controversy about this ownership group, and I've seen a lot of this crop up lately. You're part of the problem if you support them and you buy tickets. The only way this organization will change, because we've been talking, Patrick, about a lack of talent on the blue line since the last time we did this in person and a couple of years prior to that, and it still hasn't been fixed. And I get defensemen take longer to develop. They don't have any. They don't have any.
Yeah.
But this issue that, hit them in the pocketbook. How can you spend money on this team? Last night, okay, they were reasonably entertaining, fell behind, stayed in it. They've had some even games that they've lost. They have had some wild games, in particular. I look at home, 5-1, 5-2, like Detroit, 6-1. There's no value in going to those games and paying $12 for beer.
Well, look, $12 for beer, that's a cheap beer.
No, but is this going to have an impact?
It's a great question, and we're now at the point where the student rush tickets are back. They're charging $29 to get you in the upper bowl. Like, that's prices that you could get when last time there were student rush tickets 20 years ago, and they were trying to fill that bill.
$2 programs, bring them back.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think a lot about the last Bruce Boudreau game. That Saturday in January. When I made a point before I went inside, I went and talked to some fans outside, and there were two in particular that I ended up quoting, and one of them, he basically was like, what, I've been a fan my whole life. I've had season tickets. I'm not going to keep my season tickets. Of course, I will continue to pay attention, but I'm not investing myself the way I used to. And then on the other hand, there was another guy who has been a season ticket holder. He said he's been involved, I guess, with his family since day one. And he's kind of like, what else are you going to do? Like, there isn't that still, I think, is an element there. I think it's less and less, but there is that element. This is the only show in town, and that people are going to, maybe it'll be fun. But the fact is, I think people are going to the games. I don't know how much fun they're having, but there's still enough people willing to pay the price, because that's the thing. What are you willing to pay? Well, people are apparently willing to pay $29, $39 to go to a game at the sort of the base price and fill in. They're not selling out, but they're getting people in the building, and so that, as long as there's some of that, but. The other truth is that, as someone else pointed out, I said at some point recently, well, they're not making any money. And they said, well, they are making money. Yeah. They're just not making as much as they used to, because they've made decisions in other parts of the business. They haven't, the building needs work. We know. Well,
it's also the broadcasting. Let's face it, most professional sports leagues these days can butter their bread with the broadcast revenue. The ticket sales are gravy, right? So, we know the playoff. That's the playoff revenue is where they make the real cash.
Yeah, and in the end, Sportsnet pays them X amount of money, and that's all the team cares about. And it's on Sportsnet to try to figure out how to get people to pay for advertising, whatever. Absolutely, but in the end, it is still a gate-driven league. There is that factor of getting people in the building that does actually make a difference. So we're in that endless kind of cycle. How long can they keep going? Can they keep going? Can they keep going? Well, people keep showing up. I mean, it is what are your costs? What are you looking for? What are you projecting for your profits? They are spending some money on the building, but at the end of the day, that is really what this is about. It's unfortunately not even about the on-ice product. It's about what are people willing to accept, what are people willing to do, and as long as people keep coming in the door, whatever the prices are, that seems clear that's enough for this ownership group. I mean, we'll see. We'll see if things change. We'll see if things go. I mean, I have to look and think that in the end, I mean, I read an interview from 14 years ago in the National Post about Brian Hutchinson talked to, and at that point, Francesco Aquilini, this was like basically year one of them being full-time owners. He said, I've spent way more time on this team than I expected I would, which, it's now 14 years on, and for 10 of those, they haven't been very good. And we know they spend a lot of time on it. You have to wonder, that is the one factor in all of this. How much time are they, how much enjoyment are they even getting out of this part of the business? Because it's a very demanding, very challenging business, and it takes a lot of work to squeeze out the money.
It does, but it can change quickly. And I think this year in particular, people will talk about boycotting, or I don't want to go, or it's bad hockey, or whatever it is. If you land Connor Bedard, you're going to have a season ticket waiting list again. And that's selling hope, and that's excitement. I did want to ask you about this specifically. Famously, around the Bruce Boudreau being let go, when Rick Tocchet happened to be walking by the stadium that morning, and Patrick Allvin hired him on the spot. He just made the decision that morning. Liar. Anyway, we say this, and they had been very clear, we don't want to rebuild. This is a retool, whatever. It looks to me like this is a rebuild.
Yeah.
Like they have been, fine, the Bo Horvat trade, they were forced to play that hand because of the salary cap. Whether there are other pieces that we thought were foundational, like Brock Besser leaving in the future, Thatcher Demko again, his name's been out there lately. It seems to me like this team, they're not trying to lose. I don't think anyone should want to try to lose. But if you're icing a lineup that doesn't have the chance to compete every night.
No, and you've nailed it. I mean, in the end, there is an element here of saying, okay, if we, the lower we get in the standings, and they're playing less than 300 hockey since Christmas. If they carry on at this rate, they're going to end up with something like 53 points, I think, on the season. Well, the last place team, the Montreal Canadiens, last year had 55 points. So, you don't want to. Finishing last doesn't guarantee you Connor Bedard. In fact, not finishing last gives you a slightly better chance of winning the lottery. That is in the element that they're not talking about it that much, although they've been started winking at it because, of course, Jim Rutherford made the joke, I thought we were tanking. And Patrick Allvin was honest with us. He said, we are 27th in the league. Look where we are. Of course we're going to throw in the towel, but not saying we're rebuild. So, and in you've already mentioned it, all the trade chatter, that there's still stuff that could yet happen. And I think something will happen. We'll see how extensive it is. That, to me, is the real tell in the end, is how things play out over the next couple of weeks as we head into the trade deadline, whether they really do end up doing the major surgery they've talked about and moving on from sort of all these players and deals that they sound like they're willing to move on from, but we'll see if they're.
So obviously Bedard that's the jewel, right? Like people say he's the best player since, Tyler Benson. I mean, Connor McDavid, we won't revisit that famous Providence front page. But it is a deep draft. People talk about the top 10, the top 15, all having the potential to be real franchise impact players. If they don't land the top pick, is there any way they can avoid taking a defenseman? Considering that has been the I know it's always, especially when you're in that, if you're in the 2, 3, 4, like you want to take the best player available. Maybe it's a trade down option, but honestly, this team has nothing in the pipe when it comes to
it does come all down to what happens, I think, with that first rounder that they may have this year, depending on what happens with the Islanders. So if the Islanders don't finish in the bottom 12, then that pick is the Canucks, or at least I think I can't remember who has the option. I think Lou Lamoriello said something interesting. They have the option. That's right. So so we'll see how that plays out. I mean, I really think, you're really onto something, and that's the other factor I've been thinking about. So, okay, if they win first overall, we know they're going to Connor Bedard. That's obvious. But if they don't, and they do have a high pick, is there something they can do to get creative? We don't see teams. It's not like any other sport. Certainly not like the NBA. We don't see teams who are going to be picking high in the draft generally be willing to fall back, even if there's huge value in picking second, third, fourth, fifth. But I do find myself wondering if this is the year that maybe we see the Canucks saying, hey, you have this defenseman, we're interested in him, like a player that can play now, because it is part of this thing that multiple people inside, not on the Canucks, but inside the game have said, like, you can make this team be competitive by 2024-25, but you have to be aggressive now. You've made a bunch of trades. You have to really go all in on this draft, and you have to be really smart and creative at this draft, because players you draft this year, would be ready potentially, if you hit it right, to play for your team in 2024. Now, they'll still be 19. They'll still be young guys. But players like that who make the NHL at that age generally are really top players, and they're going to be like, it is the Pettersson story. It is the Hughes story. So you're looking for new guys like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. Would they just pick a guy at 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever they're sitting at? Would they be willing to move that pick and fall further back, fall back to 10 or something like that, and get a player and then be able to still stay in the first round? I mean, these are all things that are interesting. Could they take that top pick and there's that Islanders pick and somehow trade up to first? That was the Brian Burke move. I mean, it seems unlikely. It seems unlikely.
I would say any other year.
Yeah, but
perhaps,
I think
but the gulf between Bedard and everyone else.
Yeah.
Like if the Blackhawks end up with that pick, I know that would drive people crazy.
Yeah.
You're not going to give it. Well, we'll give you the 4th and the 12th pick to get to move up.
Yeah.
Although you said it's not like the NBA. I don't know. Would they say 44 second rounders were traded at the trade deadline? That sounds like the Jim Benning strategy to me. Sure. I did want to ask you before.
All the conditions. I wrote about the Nets last week, and you just look if this and that. And it's logic.
I want to finish by asking you this, though. This has been a more general podcast rather than specific, because let's face it,
it's a show, Paul.
Who cares about the games anymore? There is this assumption amongst a lot of fans, tank, right? Like we know that whatever you think of that, that's why we have the draft lottery. And I talked about it. I don't think you ever want to bake in losing players that get it. The losing sets in. It doesn't bother them anymore. They're so used to it. But with where this team is, there is this notion that, okay, burn it all down except for Pettersson and Hughes. Sure. Like anyone else, you get the right offer, off they go. How do you think it's impacting this year, last year? How do you think it's impacted those two guys in particular? Can you see a scenario like Calgary?
Right.
Where whether it's Tkachuk, whether it's Gaudreau, like, sorry, I want out. Because Petey's not that far away.
No, Pettersson.
Hughes obviously is locked down.
Hughes is here. Yeah, no, it's a huge worry. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I mean, there's many reasons why Elias Pettersson switched agencies, where he left Michael Deutsch, who, and moved to CAA. I mean, CAA is huge, a huge place if you're interested in marketing, branding, power agents, all that stuff. A guy like Pat Brisson and a guy like JP Barry, his agents at CAA have seen this. They know how things go. They're very, that makes a difference. This is a guy who's going to advocate and say, this is what we want, this is what we want, this is what your team needs to look like. And, the last time I talked to Pat Brisson, that was very much on top. He knows the people involved. He knows Jim Rutherford very well. Like, that is a relationship that is everything. And so, it is going to be very much about what's the direction, what are we doing right now, how does the interaction with Rick Tocchet work, how does all those sorts of things. There's all kinds of balls in the air, and it's a very crucial last 2 months of the season that we're looking at right now. It's absolutely crucial to the future of Elias Pettersson, because of course this summer they can start talking about a contract extension. And as we saw last year, we had talk, all summer the talk was about Horvat and Miller. Well, they retained Miller and they've moved on from Horvat.
Yeah.
The trend is obvious. It'll be interesting. It's going to be. They have to get through, obviously, get to the draft. They have to get to the deadline. They have to figure out what they're doing, show the direction. But that's going to be the next thing. And if it comes to the point where they're going to have to move on from Elias Pettersson, that's going to be a very, very challenge. We talked what it's going to take. I mean, that to me in many ways is going to be that is going to be the challenge next year, is how they are able to frame themselves around what is our future going to look like. Because if it is Elias Pettersson, then that's great and people can latch onto that. But if it's not, it's going to be it's a really tough thing to sell, I think.
It is, but that's why this team is so moribund. They're just terrible, really, to follow in terms of wins and losses and where they are. But when you look at what's coming up, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
What do they do at the trade deadline? Who are they stuck with? Who can they get? Then what do you do with your, the structure of your team? What you're doing? Where do you end in the draft lottery? What are you doing in free agency? Honestly, they may seem a million miles away from it right now, but that can change in a hurry depending on how those decisions go. Yeah. Patrick, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for watching. Thanks to Woody's RV, woodysrv.com. If you're looking for an RV, we thank them for their support. Thanks to Mike Bell for making sure that this hits the internet, and we will talk to you guys next week.